Revealed. Haunted Daggerlin's sinister secret, 100 residents disappeared. Run now. Sarah Thompson's phone buzzed violently on the kitchen counter, its light flickering like a warning beacon against the gathering dusk. The message flashed ominously, a siren call of panic that seemed to echo through the quiet suburb of Daggerlin. Revealed. Haunted Daggerlin's sinister secret, 100 residents disappeared. Run now. She felt a chill snake down her spine, fingers trembling as if the air had thickened with dread. This was her hometown, the place that had once been a safe haven. Even with the urgency dying in her pocket, Sarah had to push the fear aside. Her kids needed dinner. She couldn't let dread ripple into their lives. Outside, the streets were unsettlingly silent, lit only by distant street lamps casting flickering shadows that danced in the corners of her vision. Sure, things had felt off in the past months. She had noticed strange gatherings in the darkened cul-de-sacs, whispers that echoed like ominous winds in the air. But keeping her children safe was her only mission, and she would put on a brave face. Then the first sinister element revealed itself. She had come home from another long night shift to find her neighbor Susan standing at the foot of her driveway, her face gaunt and hollow, eyes scanning the street as if it were a battlefield. "Have you heard about Melissa?" she asked, breathless, as if she had sprinted to deliver the news. "She has gone, Sarah. Just vanished." The words hung, heavy and lifeless, as the warmth of her neighbor's familiar presence turned icy and foreign. Sarah steered her children into their rooms. The subtle terror rose. Was it paranoia? The hairs on the back of her neck tingled, every nightfall now painted with shadows that lurked longer than before. A quick glance to the window showed her children's laughter had replaced quiet silence outside. But unsettled eyes watched, shadows stretching, posing questions they didn't dare ask aloud. She tried dismissing the whispers churning in her mind. Could her friends, her neighbors, really have ulterior motives? Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Days passed, and the urgency escalated. The local diner, a warm hub of gossip, felt suffocating. Instead of laughter, residents exchanged anxious glances, words slipping like fog through tightly clenched teeth. Just yesterday, she overheard a group discussing James, the smooth-talking community leader whose charisma was starting to feel disconcerting. "It's for the greater good," they said, their voices cloaked in conspiratorial tones that gripped Sarah's heart in a vice. The feeling of dread reached a peak as she considered how acceptance could shackle her to the very darkness that was closing in. As she pieced together the tales buried under the surface, Sarah remembered the voicemail from Melissa. "They're watching us, Sarah. You need to run." The room felt colder, a creeping realization tightening its grip. Before she could comprehend the enormity of it all, she found herself facing the reality of the red insignia on her door, a haunting mark summoning primal fear. Shadows danced at her window each night, drawing closer, tantalizing her in their sinister embrace. With every tick of the clock, she was left wondering if she could escape Daggerlin, or if the very heart of her hometown had other plans for her and her children. The night draped itself over Daggerlin like an inescapable shroud, suffocating and complete. Sarah felt the weight of silence press against her. She clutched her children's bedtime toys, comfort in the form of stuffed animals, and dared not glance out the window. Each tick of the clock echoed in her mind, a countdown to an unknown horror. The red insignia still burned in her consciousness, an ugly blight on her home. Why hadn't she noticed it sooner? Why hadn't anyone spoken about it? As sleep refused to come, she listened to the soft, rhythmic breathing of her children. They were unaware of the encroaching nightmare, and her heart ached with the desire to shield them from its grasp. Hours passed like centuries. The house groaned with age, but a new sound crept in a low murmur, almost like wind whispering through trees. She stiffened, straining to hear past the thumping of her pulse. The whispers rose, layered with panic. Were her neighbors in trouble? Or was it something worse, a gathering of those who would condemn her? Bolting upright, Sarah's breath quickened. She slipped into the darkness, the familiar chill wrapping around her like icy fingers. The hallway felt longer tonight, shadows licking the walls as if alive. She made her way to the front door, heart racing, convinced she'd find the remnants of Melissa's warning outside. The street lay quiet, moonlight cast in brilliant whites and dark blues. But not a soul roamed, only the flickering streetlight cast its pale glow, illuminating something that snagged her breath. A group huddled in the cul-de-sac, their faces obscured, but she recognized the dark shapes. They were the same neighbors she had seen gathering in the past weeks. Slinking back, Sarah pressed her back against the wall, terror coiling around her gut. They were chanting, a synchronized hum that vibrated through the air, disturbing the stillness. What were they doing? The thin line between fear and curiosity drew her closer. Peeking through the curtain, Sarah stifled a gasp. James led the group, arms raised as if summoning a hidden power. Above them, invisible to the naked eye, something stirred. It felt as if a shadow had slipped across the veil of reality. A shiver rushed through her as whispers dug into her ears. The chosen must follow, or face the wrath. She stumbled back, breath hitching in her throat. If she did not act, what would happen to her children? Every nerve in her body screamed that she must protect them at all costs. But what could she do against something so far-reaching? Suddenly, a piercing scream split the night, slicing through the chant. A voice she recognized: Susan. Sarah's heart dropped. She had to help her. But the moment she brushed the door open, the air around her thickened. An oppressive force like a physical barrier halted her in place. Time stretched. She felt the pit of despair bloom inside her as black tendrils of fear gripped her torso. Sarah's eyes darted back to the gathering outside. They were looking towards her house now, searchlights in their eyes. Was it suspicion or hunger? In that moment, she realized, whatever haunted Daggerlin had set its sights on her. As the chanting grew louder, the shadows beckoned her to come closer, to step outside and join them. She clutched the doorframe, blood pounding in her ears. Would she break under the pressure? Or could she find a way to rescue her children from this unseen terror? What happened next would decide the fate of her family. The ground trembled slightly beneath her, almost as if Daggerlin itself was alive, groaning under the weight of its secrets. Sarah's breath came heavy, each inhalation seemingly drawing the encroaching night closer. The whispers grew, warped and twisted, as shadows crawled towards her from every corner of the room. "Mommy?" A small voice broke through the oppressive shroud of fear. Emily stood at the top of the stairs, sleep clinging to her eyes, clutching her beloved bear. Panic surged through Sarah. She had to protect her children. "Back to bed, sweetie," Sarah managed, forcing a brave face. But even she could hear the tremors in her voice. Emily hesitated, eyes darting from her mother to the door. "What's wrong? Just stay close." The little girl's brow furrowed in confusion, yet she obeyed, creeping down the stairs. Sarah's grip tightened on the doorframe, the wood splintering under her fingers. She could sense the threat outside, the chilling unknown that called for her. The chanting rose to a crescendo, drowning out her thoughts. "Sarah, Sarah, Sarah." It was a name now, a mantra, a lure, a call meant to drag her into their dark circle. She felt her knees weaken, the pressure pulling her toward the sound. The warmth of her children was the only thing anchoring her. "Please, we need to go now," Emily whimpered, her small voice barely cutting through the noise. With a burst of resolve, Sarah turned, gathering her daughter close. "We'll stay inside. Just stay quiet." But who were they? Were those people really her neighbors, driven mad by some sinister force? She couldn't trust them anymore. A new fear blossomed, thick and black. Another scream rang out, a desperate, wrenching cry that seemed to slice through the night, shattering any remaining shards of safety. It was Susan again, but now it was tinged with an unmistakable tone of betrayal. "They're taking her. But the rest of the sentence was drowned by the chorus. The chanting intensified, and with it, she felt the air thickening, stifling. "They're coming to get out," a voice exclaimed from outside, ringing with chilling malice. The group began to stomp and clap, rallying as if to awaken something buried in the heart of Daggerlin. "Shh, just listen," Sarah whispered urgently. It didn't sound like a group, more like a cult, fervent and hungry. What could compel them to act this way? It had to be the mark, that vile insignia she'd seen all over town. Moments stretched into eternity, every heartbeat echoing the threat outside. A surge of force slammed against the door. It rattled on its hinges. Suddenly, a furious thud sent Sarah scrambling backward, heart racing. She pulled Emily in tighter, squeezing her eyes shut for a moment to suppress her rising terror. The door shuddered again. "Sarah, open the door." James's voice boomed, laced with desperation. "You have to join us. You have been chosen." Panic crashed through Sarah. The tone that had once been friendly now dripped with a sinister undertone. A promise of consequences if she didn't comply. "No," she shouted, her voice cracking. "We're not going anywhere with you." But the chant swelled once more, a human wave battering against her sanctuary. They'd do anything to break her resolve, to lure her outside. Without thinking, Sarah rushed to the kitchen, frantically searching for anything. She needed a weapon, a way to protect her children. But darkness closed in like a vice. She could feel it now, lurking beyond the door, sliding toward her like an unwelcome guest. "Mom, I'm scared." Emily's tiny whisper broke her concentration. The door bucked with renewed intensity. "I know, baby, I know." But the words felt hollow, almost futile against the raw threat encroaching on their home. Gritting her teeth, she spotted the old kitchen knife resting near the sink. With trembling hands, she grasped it, the cold steel biting into her palm. The chanting escalated, urgency driving it forward. It was now or never. "Whatever happens, we stay together," Sarah instructed, her voice low but fierce. "We fight, do you understand?" Emily nodded, her eyes wide with fear, yet filled with determination. As the door shuttered one last time, Sarah felt the collective malice of the gathering outside. They would break through any moment. The grip of fate tightened around her family. What were they capable of? And even more terrifying, what did they want from her? The door splintered. In a split second, Sarah steeled herself, the knife clutched tight. The time for choice had passed. Would she stand against them or give in to the sickening pull of their demands? The door burst open, revealing flickering shadowed figures beyond. And in that instant, she braced for whatever horror lay ahead. The door crashed open, sending splinters flying like deadly confetti. Dark shapes flooded into the kitchen, their faces obscured by hoods, eyes gleaming with an unnatural light. Sarah's heart raced, a wild drumbeat echoing in her ears. "Join us, Sarah," they chanted, a monstrous harmony that made the hair on her arms stand on end. "You have been chosen." Fighting through the fog of terror, Sarah brandished the knife, its blade glinting in the dim light. Emily clung to her, the bare pressed against her chest, a small cluster of warmth in an ocean of cold fear. "Stay behind me," Sarah shouted, her voice cracking but determined. They pushed forward, undeterred by her weapon. "Embrace the mark." One of the figures stepped closer, a grotesque smile twisting their lips. "It will save you. Get back." Sarah screamed, slashing the air with the knife. She was shaking, weary, but she wouldn't let them take Emily. Not today. The front row of figures staggered back, momentarily shocked by the sudden fury. Sarah felt a flicker of hope. "We can't let them get us. We need to find a way out." "Downstairs," Emily pointed, her voice firm despite her terror. "The basement. We can lock them out." With adrenaline surging, Sarah grabbed Emily's hand, sprinting through the chaos as dark figures swarmed around. The chanting rose again, chanting her name, pulling her back, urging her to join them. Shadows peeled away from the wall, reaching like fingers, longing to draw her into their depths. They barreled down the narrow staircase, the door slamming shut behind them. But there was little solace in the dim lighting of the basement. Moisture clung to the stone walls, the air heavy and pungent. "Mommy, what if they come down here?" Emily's voice trembled. "They can't. Not if we barricade the door." Sarah moved hurriedly, pushing old boxes against the heavy wooden door. They both held their breath as the faint sound of thumping echoed from above, followed by the chorus growing fainter. Outside the door, the cultist chant turned into a growl, reverberating in a primal rhythm. They were gathering, plotting. What if they broke through? "I'm scared," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know, sweetheart." Sarah knelt before her daughter, searching her eyes for courage. "We just need to stay quiet and hidden." "If they can't find us," a creaking sound interrupted them, sending a jolt up Sarah's spine. The floorboards above them were shifting. They were searching. Suddenly, an eerie glow began to seep through the cracks of the door, the shadows shifting and twisting, teasing at the edges of their refuge. "You cannot hide." Sarah, the voice was soft, almost seductive, but edged with something cold and threatening. "We can protect you. You need only to embrace it. No more. Leave us alone." Sarah screamed, the knife shaking in her grip, her breath coming fast. The voices outside twisted into a cacophony of laughter, blending into each other. The flashing lights pulsed in time with her racing heart. What was happening up there? Were they trying to summon something? With a pounding heart, Sarah crouched low, dragging Emily to the ground beside a crate. "Should we need to be quiet?" But as the chant morphed into a low, droning hum, she felt the air around them vibrate. Tremors shook the floor beneath them, and a deep, ominous sound began to resonate from somewhere deep in the heart of Daggerlin. What was lurking just above them? As the darkness grew heavier, Sarah's eyes caught a glimpse of the mark, the twisted symbol of Daggerlin glowing on the walls as if mocking them. Then the door shuddered. The pounding grew more insistent, and Sarah's throat tightened. She tightened her grip on the knife, a desperate plea for survival. If they broke through, if the shadows poured into the room, Emily squeezed her eyes shut. Suddenly, a loud crash sounded through the basement, and the figures spilled in through an unseen entrance, the glow illuminating their faces, a mix of fear, madness, and something else that made Sarah's stomach turn. "What do they want?" she thought, a whispered terror echoing in her mind. And then she heard it, a voice clear as day amidst the chaos. "Join us or be sacrificed." The basement felt smaller, the threats closing in. There was no way out, not without confrontation. With Emily by her side, adrenaline surged anew. It was time to decide. Would they face the shadows head-on or risk what awaited above? A new figure emerged through the glowing mist, and Sarah realized their isolation was a grave illusion. "Mom?" Emily pressed closer, fear etched into her tiny features. Before she could answer, the basement's lights flickered, plunging them into tenuous darkness, whispers swirling like smoke. What awaited them in the shadows? And would they be brave enough to confront the truth lurking within the depths of Daggerlin? As the figures advanced, the reality of their choice loomed, a specter of dread. All she could feel was a question forming in the silence. Was there only hope in confronting the darkness, or becoming part of it? A shiver crawled down Sarah's spine as the figures loomed closer, their glowing faces painted with a mixture of anticipation and malice. The flickering darkness did little to reassure her. Instead, it deepened their shadows, making them seem more monstrous. "Mommy," Emily's whisper trembled in the air, fragile and haunting. Sarah turned to her daughter, cradling Emily's cheek with trembling fingers. "We'll be okay, sweetheart," she urged, but even as she spoke, doubt gnawed at her resolve. The basement felt like it was shrinking, the oppressive atmosphere crushing down as the shadows moved closer, their chants transforming into a chorus of unsettling promises. "Serve the darkness, it will save you," panicked. Sarah scanned the basement for a way out. The door was blocked, and the walls felt like they were closing in. "We need to make a plan," she whispered under her breath, barely audible over the chant. Questions buzzed in her head like hornets. What did they want from her? How many were out there? "Hide!" Emily tugged at her sleeve, pointing toward a small nook behind an old furnace. It was a tight squeeze, but it would keep them hidden at least for a moment longer. They pressed into the cramped space, Emily's bear digging into Sarah's side, a comforting weight against the encroaching darkness. Heart pounding, Sarah counted the shadows as they moved. She tried to hold onto Emily's hand, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the child was slipping away, lost in the fear and chaos. The figures moved throughout the basement, searching, their eyes sweeping past the dark corners where Sarah and Emily crouched. "You can't hide from your true self," one of them hissed, voice dripping with malice. "Join us, Sarah. You're destined for so much more." "Mom, I'm scared," Emily whimpered, her grip tightening on Sarah's hand. The chant shifted, turning into a guttural roar that echoed against the stone walls, drowning out their breaths. The vibrations shook the very foundation of the house, and Sarah felt it in her bones, a warning, a threat. Mustering all her courage, she leaned close to Emily. "Whatever happens, don't let go of me," she whispered, her voice steady but strained. Suddenly, the room grew cold. An icy breeze swept through the basement, carrying with it an unholy stench, as if the very essence of dread had permeated the air. Shadows flickered, merging into a single dark mass that twisted and thrashed before where Sarah and Emily hid. "Join us," it echoed, the voice a chorus of the damned. "You are one of us," Emily gasped, and Sarah felt her heart sink. What if this was it? She wrapped her arms around her daughter, shielding her from whispers that promised salvation if only she would submit. Then, without warning, a loud crack split the air. One of the figures had found a hidden exit, an old trapdoor shaking beneath the weight of their chaotic presence. "We must go through it," the figure called, its voice a scratchy rasp. "The time has come. Embrace the mark." The two women could feel the rush of air from the opening, a bizarre allure pulling at them. It beckoned like a siren song, luring them toward an unseen fate. "Mom, what do we do?" Emily's eyes were wide, teetering on the brink of panic. We fight together," Sarah declared, gripping the knife with raw determination. "No matter what, we'll find a way out. We aren't part of them. We're stronger than this darkness." But even as the words left her lips, doubt clouded her mind. What if they were simply delaying the inevitable, running into the arms of a creature they could not comprehend? Outside their hiding spot, silhouettes converged, ready to descend deeper into the basement's chilling embrace. An infernal chant filled the air, drowning out all reason. And then, the lights flickered violently, revealing one figure standing at the trapdoor entrance, a gaunt creature with hollow cheeks and empty eyes, its gaze fixed on Sarah, unfathomable hunger lurking beneath the surface. "Embrace the darkness," it whispered, the words rolling like thunder through the gathering chaos. As the shadows moved towards them, Sarah realized the choice was not about hiding anymore. In a moment fueled by both terror and defiance, she stood up, knife glinting menacingly in the pale light, ready to confront them. The door of the basement burst open wide, spilling a blinding light. But then, a scream shattered her resolve, a scream that sounded eerily familiar. Was it Emily? Terror gripped her heart as the realization settled in. The time to confront the darkness was now. But at what cost? Would the shadows yield to her defiance or consume them both? The blinding light poured into the basement, casting long shadows that danced around the walls, momentarily breaking the oppressive grip of darkness. Sarah squinted against the brightness, breath held tightly in her chest. She spun towards Emily, her heart racing, just in time to see the figure lurch forward from the trapdoor, reaching for her daughter. "Emily!" Sarah screamed, her voice a desperate, guttural cry that echoed off the stone walls. The knife felt heavy in her hand, a weight of stark resolve fighting against her rising panic. Emily had barely emerged from their hiding spot, framed in the doorway's glow, frozen by fear. In that split second, time seemed to slow. Shadows flickered around the creature, drawn like a moth to a flame, almost feeding off the light that burned so brightly at their threshold. Sickly hunger twisted the gaunt figure's expression, and it lunged, arms stretching impossibly long. Without thinking, Sarah lunged forward, wild determination overriding any rational thought. She swung the knife, the blade glistening with hope and terror as she aimed for the monster. It recoiled just in time, but not before a clawed hand brushed over Emily's shoulder, leaving behind an icy chill. The instant contact felt like an eternity, a flash of vulnerability that threatened to steal her daughter away. "Run!" Sarah shouted, her voice commanding, desperate. She pushed Emily back toward the safety of the nook, her heart pounding with the pounding rhythm of the creature's breath heavy and foul. Just as she turned to face the advancing shadows, the basement itself shuddered as if anticipating a battle. The figures pressed closer, their whispers converging into a hypnotic chant, enveloping Sarah like a heavy fog. "You will join us, you will become part of the truth," they crooned, a sickly sweetness filling the air. A primal scream erupted from Emily, piercing the tension flying around them. "Mommy!" Her daughter's cry ripped through Sarah's focus, and for a moment, it felt as though the world might end. She could see terror in Emily's eyes, a reflection of her own. Sarah felt the tendrils of despair trying to tighten around her heart, but she fought hard against it. "Emily, trust me. Just a little longer," she yelled, knowing she needed to buy time. With each passing second, the basement felt smaller, the shadows thicker, twisting into grotesque forms that loomed large in Sarah's sight. She raised her knife, brandishing it like a beacon. "Get away from us!" she shouted into the darkness, drawing upon every ounce of strength she had. Suddenly, a black shape rushed towards her. Sarah swung wildly, her movements frantic. The blade struck flesh, and a screech filled the air, high-pitched and enough to send a jolt through Sarah. A figure stumbled back, but it quickly transformed, merging with the shadows that surrounded them in a rush of darkness. The scream of triumph from the depths of the basement filled her ears, shaking her resolve. Your defiance will only lead to your ruin. Desperation fueled her next move. In a sweeping motion, Sarah dove for the trapdoor, a desperate attempt at escape. She could sense Emily behind her, hiding again, waiting, trembling. As she reached for the warped wood, something cold seized her ankle, yanking her back like a cruel puppet. "No!" she cried out, grabbing the edges of the trapdoor, fighting the grasp of the cold shadow that held her. But the whispers intensified, the sound rising to a fever pitch, filling her mind with images of a past she didn't recognize. A pull toward the figures, a desire to join their ranks. Another howl erupted from Emily, piercing through Sarah like a knife. It broke the half-formed tendrils of submission threatening to envelop her. With sheer willpower, Sarah yanked her foot free, slamming her hand against the trapdoor, urging it to open. But as she wrenched it free, she caught a glimpse of movement behind her, something shifting in the darkness, the familiar face of her daughter dissolving behind a swirl of shadows. Horror crashed through her as the realization struck. Emily was in grave danger. "Mommy, help me!" The chant morphed into a mad descent, echoing her name, reminding Sarah of the past they had shared. The darkness was not only leaving marks on their flesh but also on their memories, ready to erase everything she had fought to protect. "Emily!" But before she could react and leap toward her daughter, the ground beneath them trembled, and more shadows gathered. Would they swallow them whole? Or was there a way to break free from the grip of despair? As the chaos swirled, Sarah realized the greatest fight wasn't just against the dark figures, but a desperate race against time itself. Could she rescue Emily before it was too late? The moment was suffocating, the air charged with dread. All around, shadows writhed and coiled, eager to consume what little light remained. Sarah's heart thundered in her chest. Each beat echoed the urgency of her desperation. She could almost hear the tendrils of darkness whispering her name, promising her liberation if only she surrendered. "Emily, stay back," she screamed, forcing herself to step further into the shadows. But the icy grip at her ankle reminded her just how close she was to losing everything. The basement trembled again. Dust plumed from the cracked ceiling, and a wave of screams rushed through her mind like a stampede. Images of women and children, faces twisted in terror, flashed before her eyes, each one a victim of the darkness. They were here too, trapped in a cycle of despair and oblivion. She could not falter. She peeked at the nook where Emily had vanished, the faintest outline of her daughter lost in the curling black mass. Moments stretched into eternity as she watched Emily disappear, swallowed by darkness, her terrified eyes fading from view. "Mommy!" Emily's voice pierced through the gloom like a beacon. An electric shiver darted down Sarah's spine, and she felt an overwhelming surge of fear turn into furious resolve. She had come too far. Surrender was not an option. Whipping the knife around, she brandished it fiercely, grasping for the last vestige of her courage. "Stay away from her!" Suddenly, figures surged forward, their twisted limbs reaching, hungry mouths gaping wide as they clamored for her attention. The hideous chants grew louder, reverberating through the stone walls, pulling on her consciousness like a puppet. "You are too late. Join us. Become one with the true form." Sarah staggered back, fighting the feeling of despair tightening around her throat. She could almost see Emily's face distorted in the creeping shadows, begging for her help, a haunting echo of sorrow. "No!" The word tore from Sarah's throat as sheer will swept through her. She closed her eyes for just a moment, remembering the laughter they shared, the stories of their lives woven into a fragile thread of hope. That thread would not snap here. With a newfound determination, Sarah lunged forward, her body fueled by adrenaline and love. She slashed wildly at the shadows that danced around her. The knife met a solid force. A grotesque face, a childish face, suddenly appeared, its mouth wide in a silent scream, eyes glimmering with lost hope. It was like hitting a wall. The creature recoiled, dissipating into smoke. The next moment, she was struck from behind, colliding against the cold stone wall. The force knocked the knife from her grip, clattering away into the darkness. Panic surged through her. She fought to regain her footing as a chorus of wretched voices whispered in her ears. "Join us, forgotten forever." Hurtling forward, Sarah pushed through the encircling gloom, the damp air thickening and suffocating around her. She had to find Emily. She groped desperately for the knife, the walls seeming to close in on her with every heartbeat. The shadows twisted, attempting to ensnare her mind once more. "Emily!" Desperation clawed at her throat as she dug her hands into the black depths, searching for any trace of her daughter. A small hand suddenly slipped into her palm, warm and alive. "Mommy, I'm scared." "Emily!" Sarah gasped, relief flooding her as she clutched her daughter's trembling form. "We have to go now." But the closing shadows shrieked and writhed, blocking their path, a solid wall of darkness that lashed out with furious rage. Sarah tore her eyes away from Emily long enough to scan for an escape, every instinct screaming at her to fight, to run. Yet, as they turned to flee, a blinding flash of light erupted from the shadows, and for one heart-stopping moment, it felt like an eternity suspended in time. "What is this?" As the brightness pulsed, the creature's whispers morphed into anguished howls. But instead of retreating, they plunged forward, a voracious tide of darkness desperate to reclaim their lost prey. "Go!" Sarah shouted, fear igniting her voice with urgency. With Emily in one hand, she lunged toward the flickering gap of the trapdoor. Would it hold? Would the light guide them to safety? Just as they neared, the shadows thickened behind them, a monstrous growl echoing through the basement's depths. The figures coiled and writhed, desperate to reclaim their lost souls. "Run, Emily, run!" Sarah shouted, pushing her daughter ahead. But as Emily stumbled forward, Sarah's heart froze. The ground quaked violently, and with it, tiles began to buckle, the basement shuddering fiercely as more shadows surged. Emily looked back, fear manifesting in wide eyes. "Mommy, please!" Would they escape, or would the dark figures finally claim them both? The next pulse of light flared, and she felt the chains of despair threaten to tighten once more. But who would hold them? "Emily, keep moving." As the shadows lunged, Sarah braced for impact. Would the basement become their tomb? Would they be left as remnants of despair in the dark? One truth remained, whether their bond would shatter or triumph. She had to fight for every last breath, every last hope. What unseen truth awaited them? And could the light truly pierce through the harrowing dark? The darkness roared behind them, a ravenous beast that craved life. And as Sarah propelled herself and Emily toward the flickering trapdoor, fear surged like electricity through her body. The desperate wails of the tortured souls clawed at Sarah's sanity, each cry a tantalizing echo of what awaited them if they failed. "Keep running," she gasped, adrenaline pounding in her ears, drowning out the chaos. Emily's small fingers trembled in her hand, every step a struggle against the weight of shadow that seemed to pull them back into its sickening depths. A sensation crawled up Sarah's spine as a whisper grazed her ear, sweet and cruel, promising release. A chance to escape the unbearable burden of this fight. That moment, the ground convulsed, tiles flying outward like shrapnel. The force sent Sarah sprawling, her grip on Emily slipping. "Mommy!" Emily screamed, her voice breaking through the haze of horror. But Sarah's hand shot out, grasping her arm just before she was yanked into the abyss. "No!" The word erupted from Sarah's throat as she dragged Emily back to her. Panic threatened to rip her apart. The shadows seemed to laugh, a sinister cacophony of voices blending into a dreadful symphony. "Join us, give in," but Sarah wasn't about to submit. She locked eyes with Emily, the determination in her daughter's gaze igniting the fading embers of courage in her own heart. "We'll make it, together." With newfound resolve, she pushed them both against the trapdoor again, its light flickering like a heartbeat, promising safety. Shadows twisted around them like angry serpents, striking out at them with clawed hands and grasping forms. Sarah could feel their icy breath, the tantalizing promise of comfort pulling at the edges of her mind. "Almost there," she shouted, trying to drown out the whispers. Just as they reached the lip of the door, a dark tendril shot out, coiling around Sarah's ankle with a tight, unyielding grip. She gasped, stumbling, but instinctively tightened her hold on Emily. "Run! Get out!" "No!" Emily cried, pleading, but Sarah could no longer hold back the tide of terror. The trapdoor loomed above them, its light flickering with urgency. Sarah's pulse quickened. The shadows sucked deeper at her limbs, pulling her back. She could feel the weight of lost lives, trapped within that dark mass, screaming to be free. Instincts battled within her, to save Emily or to save herself. The tug-of-war raged like a storm in her heart, a maelstrom of love and fear. "I won't leave you," she shouted. "What's happening?" Emily's eyes brimmed with tears, confusion mixed with dread. "Listen to me, Emily." She had to be the anchor. "You are the light. You are strong. Now go. Get us out." Emily nodded, her face set in fierce determination that reflected her mother's own spirit. With a swift, almost instinctual movement, she hopped onto the trapdoor, arms raised to signal for help, radiating a hopeful pulse of light into the void. The shadows recoiled, snarling in rage as the blinding illumination swirled around them. And for one fleeting moment, Sarah felt the weight of the darkness slacken. "This is it," she cried, adrenaline surging through her veins as she pulled against the grip on her ankle, feeling it loosen. "Emily, jump! We can make it!" With a forceful shove, she launched herself toward the light, ripping free from the grasping shadows that howled in outrage. But as she leapt, a fierce darkness lunged back, attempting to snatch her into its ravenous maw. The moment felt suspended in time, tangible and electrifying. Sarah's scream echoed as she soared. Would she break beyond the darkness? Or would the shadows claim them both at the edge of light? With Emily's hand tightly clutched, they flew towards the heaven of escape, shrouded in pulsing, radiant possibility. But what would await them on the other side? Would the sanctuary of light shield them from what lurked just beyond the threshold? And as they reached the trapdoor's opening, the vicious growls echoed behind them, a foreboding promise that the darkest hour had only just begun. They burst through the trapdoor, tumbling into a world bathed in blinding brightness. The light cocooned them, a brief moment of clarity before the darkness clawed at its edges, hissing in frustration. A second later, they landed hard on a wooden floor, disoriented, hearts racing. Sarah pushed herself up, shaking her head to clear the fog. Around them, a strange, hazy landscape emerged, It was a dilapidated room, sunlight streaming through cracked windows, illuminating the dust motes swirling in the air. But there was an unsettling silence, a stillness that felt too heavy. "Mommy?" Emily's small voice trembled as she sat up, looking around. "Where are we?" Sarah's heart sank. The room felt familiar, yet off a memory twisted and distorted. "I don't know, sweetie, but we're safe now." The shadows from before flickered in her mind, their malevolent whispers still echoing. She pushed the panic aside, embracing her daughter tightly. Yet, instead of the calm she hoped to feel, an underlying tension thickened in her chest. What lay hidden behind that door they had escaped? "Stay close to me," Sarah instructed, her voice steadier than her heart. "Let us find another way out of here." They rose to their feet, scanning the small room. Old furniture lay abandoned, forgotten relics covered with dust and grime. A faded portrait hung crookedly on the wall, its figures barely discernible. As Sarah approached, the air turned cold, a chill creeping down her spine. "There's something wrong," she whispered. Emily tugged at her sleeve, eyes wide. "Mommy, look." Sarah turned to see Emily pointing toward the far corner. A small door, almost camouflaged in the shadows, stood slightly ajar. Creaking daintily, it beckoned to them like a siren. Her gut twisted. "Do you want to check it out?" "Yes." Emily nodded fiercely, but Sarah hesitated. "Let us be careful." They edged closer, the door creaking ominously as they approached. A soft, rhythmic thumping resonated from within, like a heartbeat. Each thud made Sarah's skin crawl. "Do you hear that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Emily nodded, eyes flickering with a mixture of excitement and fear. Before Sarah could think better of it, she pushed the door open with a slow, deliberate motion. The hallway beyond was dim, stretching into shadows that seemed to cling to the walls. The thumping grew louder, a hypnotic pulse that pulled at her, daring her to step inside. "Mommy," Emily's voice quavered. The innocent joy melted away. Cautiously, they stepped into the hallway. The thumping intensified, resonating through the very bones of the building. Fear coiled around Sarah's heart, but she swallowed hard and pressed onward, the impulse to protect her daughter overriding every doubt. As they moved deeper, flickering lights began to sputter overhead, illuminating strange symbols etched into the walls, symbols that resonated with malevolence. Each step felt heavier, as if the floor threatened to give way beneath them. Suddenly, a door slammed shut behind them with a resounding bang. Sarah turned, panic flooding her veins. What was that? They rushed back, only to find the exit sealed tight, the doorknob cold and unyielding. "Mommy, I'm scared," Emily whimpered, wrapping her arms around Sarah's waist. "Me too, baby. But we can do this." Pushing through the rising fear, Sarah turned back to the hallway, bolstered by her daughter's presence. The room grew darker, shadows creeping closer, eager to snuff out the last glimmers of light. As the thumping morphed into a low growl, a whisper threaded through the oppressive quiet. "Join us," laughter echoed in the dark, a monstrous chorus of familiar voices, echoes of the lost souls they had narrowly escaped. Sarah's resolve burned brighter. "We must keep moving," she urged, dread curling like smoke in the pit of her stomach. But just ahead, a door loomed at the end of the hallway, its surface etched with those same ominous symbols. A sense of dread seeped into her bones as she approached. "Mom?" Emily's voice wavered. "What if it's another trap?" "Then we'll face it together," Sarah replied, fierce determination igniting inside her. With the shadows pressing in, they took a breath and prepared to step through the threshold. What awaited them behind that door? The pulsing growl intensified, thrumming violently with the darkness, as if anticipating their arrival. Just as Sarah reached for the handle, a cacophony of whispers erupted, drowning out their fear. The darkness wasn't finished with them yet. The door creaked ominously as it swung open, revealing a room swathed in shadows, pulsing with an oppressive energy that made Sarah's skin prick. The air was thick and damp, filled with scents that reminded her of decay. Emily clung tightly to her mother's side, eyes wide and searching, every bit the picture of fear and innocence in a world that threatened to swallow them whole. "Stay close," Sarah whispered, though even she could hear the tremor in her voice. What awaited them? The shadows danced like wraiths, creeping along the edges of perception, embodying the dark whispers that had haunted them for so long as they stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind them, a finality echoing through the ghastly silence. Then, all at once, the thumping resumed, louder and more determined. It pulsed through the floor, rattling their bones, an insatiable heartbeat that matched the rising of dread in Sarah's chest. An unsettling figure emerged from the gloom, a cloaked silhouette, hood obscuring its features. "You thought you could escape," it crooned, voice sweet like poisoned honey, dripping with malice. "You're home now," the shadows behind it writhing as if alive, a swirling tide of darkness eager for a bidding. Fear surged in Sarah, but she clenched her fists, forcing herself to hold steady. They had fought too hard to turn back now. "What do you want?" she shouted, channeling her fear into defiance. "We aren't part of your darkness." A cold, mocking laugh filled the chamber. "But you are, Sarah. Daggerlin is a part of you and you are a part of it." "No," Emily cried, clutching tighter to her mother's leg. "We're not like you." Sarah felt anger rise within her, boiling hot. "We will not be your pawns. We will never join you." The figure leaned closer, and Sarah could feel a chill creeping through the air. "It doesn't matter. You will witness the fate of all who oppose the chosen. The pact is sealed." Suddenly, the shadows shot forward like lightning, swirling around them, trapping them in a cocoon of fear. Sarah's heart raced as she fought against the suffocating grip of the darkness. She lifted her chin, steeling her resolve. "Emily, hold on to me. Whatever happens, don't let go. I want tea," Emily promised, voice steadying even as fear sparkled in her eyes. With a rumbling roar, the shadow mass surged, revealing ghostly visages, neighbors, friends, long-lost souls, each twisted in eternal torment. "Join us, become one with the night," the cacophony pleaded, and Sarah could feel their pain, the weight of their despair pressing against her. But now she understood it was a deception. These shadows, these tortured souls, were forever caught in cycles of torment. And so long as she and Emily stood together, she would never let that happen to them. Together, she breathed, gripping Emily's hand tightly. "We're stronger than this darkness." With every ounce of willpower, Sarah charged forward, dragging Emily with her. The shadows recoiled in shock, and as they moved, the flickering whispers lost coherence. "No, you cannot." But before they could react, a blinding light erupted from the depths of their union, expanding like a sunrise over their battered spirits. The shadows shrieked, dissolving into wisps of smoke that were carried away on the tide of illumination. "Stay by me. Keep running." They dashed forward, heartbeats in sync, a pulse fueled by hope. The light enveloped them like a tunnel, leading towards an unseen exit that shimmered with promise. The shadows writhed, furious at being denied their prey. But the light pushed back, sweeping through the room, reclaiming lost souls from the dark. "Mom, look." Emily pointed ahead, and Sarah squinted against the brightness. A door stood resolute, a portal filled with the kind of warmth that made every cell in Sarah's body hum with life. It radiated safety, love, and freedom, a stark contrast to the chill of shadows surrounding them. Gripping Emily's hand tighter, Sarah surged forward, the oppressive weight of darkness dissipating as they drew closer to the door. "We're almost there." An anguished howl echoed behind them, shadowy hands clawing at the light as their ranks fell apart like a collapsing house of cards. The chanting turned frantic, desperate cries merging into a cacophony of fury, loss, and defeat. "Run," Sarah cried, and they pushed through the door, the world bursting into brilliant color. They stumbled into the sunlight, gasps of fresh air filling their lungs as the shadows receded behind them, their power broken. The vast blue sky spread endlessly overhead, a canvas of bright possibility. Sarah turned, breathless, and watched as the haunting presence faded into nothingness, a memory of something once terrifying, now a distant echo. "Mommy," Emily laughed, free and joyous, spinning in the open space, face alight with wonder. We did it. With tears of relief blurring her vision, Sarah knelt, pulling her daughter into a fierce embrace. We did it, baby. We fought and we won. Together, they forged their path away from the shadows of Daggerlin, towards the warmth of a new beginning, a fresh start. Each footstep felt lighter, as if the dark weight of fear had been lifted like a heavy fog dissipating at dawn. As they walked, Sarah glanced back one last time at the place they survived. No longer shackled by fear, the specter of Daggerlin would be a story of resilience, hope, and the unbreakable bond of a mother and daughter. And just like that, their home was finally free as the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting golden beams across the landscape. Sarah held Emily's hand, ready to embrace the future together. Now, when the past calls, they stand together, no shadows needed. If you loved this story, you need to subscribe immediately to catch our next exclusive tales that take your breath away. Smash that like button now to help us reach more fans like you who crave a good story. Flood the comments section with your thoughts, reactions, and theories. What did you think just happened? And wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to hear this ending. True fans like you know how important it is to support your storytellers.